Guys, welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about a serious topic. We're going to be discussing the Tuskegee Experiments, which were a series of experiments that took place in the 1930s on African American males, in which the United States government tested both the long-term and the short-term effects of syphilis on the human body. This has gone down in history as one of the most disheartening studies done in American history, as it was highly unethical, and today it serves as a reminder as to why there is a strained relationship between the African American community and the United States government. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get into this video. If you guys like this channel, go ahead and hit the subscribe button down below, or if you like this video, go ahead and hit the like up button. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. Tuskegee experiments began in 1932. During the time, there was no known treatment for syphilis, which is a sexually transmitted disease, and the United States government wanted to test the effects of syphilis on the human body. So they recruited around 600 African American males. Most of them were sharecroppers in Tuskegee, Alabama, to be a part of this study, in which in exchange for being a part of the study, these men would receive free medical care. So at the time, the men were not fully aware of what was being done in the study. They just knew that the United States government was going to be monitoring their bodies, but they had no idea what the study was really about. And I don't think anybody realized how unethical the study would become and how disheartening it would become, as well as these men were virtually dehumanized throughout the process of this study. In the beginning of the study, the United States Public Health Service informed the men that they were being treated for a study in which they were going to study the effects of bad blood, which also translates to syphilis, on their bodies, but they had no idea that the actual disease was syphilis. At the beginning of the study, about 399 of the men had latent syphilis and about 200 of the men were disease-free. I really want to emphasize the point that syphilis was not synonymous with bad blood at the time. Bad blood meant that you could have a variety of other sicknesses and diseases, so these men were 100% unaware of the negative effects that syphilis could have or how detrimental it could be to their health. And so basically the study continued all the way through the 40s, and the part that is really shocking and horrifying is that even in 1947, when penicillin was known to be a treatment for syphilis, they still continued the study because they were determined to see the long-term effects. And so they would bring the men in for weekly checkups, and during these weekly checkups, they would basically analyze their bodies and see what syphilis was doing to their bodies, even though they knew that there was a treatment available in 1947. And to basically, I guess, justify what they were doing, they would give men minerals or basically placebos, but non-effective treatments to kind of see how those would affect the men, even though they knew that penicillin would have been the best option. That I found especially shocking is that the Public Health Service officials basically convinced the doctors in Macon County to not provide the men with treatment even after 1947, when penicillin became widely available. Even when these men started to go blind and experience negative effects such as death from the disease of syphilis, the public health officials still refused to do anything and proceeded with the study because they really wanted to understand the disease itself, even though their participants were live human beings. It took until the mid-1960s for Peter Buxton, who was a researcher, to find out about the experiment, and he was the first person to actually express a type of concern with what was going on, and he expressed his opinions to the committee. But even despite expressing his opinions and some people on the committee having an issue, they ultimately decided to continue the experiment because they believed that the long-term study would be beneficial and was more important than these men's lives. While tracking the experiment thoroughly and to its very end, the men would actually the researchers performed autopsies on dead men's bodies just so they could get inside and really see the long-term effects of syphilis on the human body. And that was the main reason why they didn't want to end the experiment, is because they wanted to see the longevity of what syphilis would do in the long term. And they realized that since no one was holding them accountable, they could really study these men for decades and decades on end. Eventually, out of complete frustration, Peter Buxton decided to leak the story to the Associated Press through a friend called Jean Heller, and Jean Heller leaked the story to the press in 1972, and immediately the study received a bunch of outrage and a bunch of public outlash. But I would just like to emphasize the point that this study started in the 1930s, and it took until the 1970s for it to receive public attention and for the study to end. By the time the study had ended, 28 of the participants had died directly from syphilis. 100 of the participants had died from related complications related to the study. 40 of the participants' spouses had been infected, and 19 of their children had also been born with the disease. So in 1973, the United States government decided to hold several hearings regarding the Tuskegee experiments and ended up granting the families and the descendants of the families over $10 million in settlement, but by then the damage had already been done. Even though they also set new guidelines and expectations for studies done on human participants, these families lost family members, their lives and their health was put at risk simply to study the long-term effects of syphilis on the human body, a study that was honestly inhuman and completely disheartening. So even though the government has made strides both financially and in policy, I still believe the Tuskegee experiments were completely unethical and should have never happened. And honestly, it's one of the reasons why there is still a strong sense of distrust between the African American community and public health officials today. Until 1997 for the national government to publicly apologize to the families of the Tuskegee experiment, which President Clinton did in a message or a public speech out to the families. But even though there was an apology, I still feel like the families of the Tuskegee experiment were negatively affected, and this should have never happened in the first place. The last participant of the study passed away in 2004. Since then, Tuskegee University has set up a Center for Bioethics and Research in Health to make sure that another situation of this magnitude never happens again, and also to make sure that the African American community is getting the justice that they deserve in terms of treatment and studies. So to this day, the Tuskegee experiment is a constant reminder of why there is a sense of distrust between the African American community and the national government, and really shows as a reminder of why it's important for us to know our history, but also to make strides to a better nation and to make better decisions about the lives of all people in the future. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I think it's really important to talk about issues and stories like this because they are critical parts of our history, and it's only through knowing our history that we can make sure not to make the same mistakes again. But I really hope that you guys enjoyed learning more about the Tuskegee experiments, the background of Tuskegee experiments, and the final impact and result that the Tuskegee experiments continue to have today. I'm also planning to make a video about Henrietta Lacks and her HeLa cells. So if you guys want a video about that, go ahead and leave some comments down below, and other suggestions for future videos. But thank you guys so much for watching, and if you guys have enjoyed this video and want to join the family, go ahead and hit the subscribe button down below. Thank you so much for watching. Bye!